I will say this. The smile I had on my face when these all arrived as a pre-production prototype, as in the look of them, I was over the moon.
Hi, I'm Martin from Victory Amps, and
I'm Thorpy from Thorpy Effects.
Indeed, and we've been up to no good. We've been working on a little pandemic collaboration.
Absolutely.
Indeed, and we're quite pleased with the outcome.
It kicked off for us as Thorpy Effects. Got a phone call. We're thinking about doing these. Would you know anyone who could advise on certain, the pedal specific intricacies? And I just said, yeah, I can do that. Yeah. It was literally that. I was like, yeah, I'm in.
Nice one.
I love the amps. I love what you do. All the way back to Cornford, all the way through to Victory. I was like, yeah, I've got to be involved. Yeah, so our initial basis was the valve preamp pedals.
Yeah.
And so I got sent them all, and I'm really happy because I was involved at the stage where the copper valve preamp was being developed, or it was towards the end of that. And so I had a prototype of that. It's quite an honor, really. I was really pleased. Yeah. So got those all lined up, plugged them all in, tested them through a high watt. And this is where I made an error. Is my assumption was that they were good for going into the valve, which valve amp at the front end and in the loop, but I just I tested them so that they were going into the front end of a high watt, a DR103, a vintage one. Yeah. And so everything, the first prototypes of these pedals were voiced that way.
Yeah.
And I think I missed something there, because it's only when that preamp pedal is plugged into the loop that the full character of it was revealed. And so I sat there scratching my head a little bit when that was when that was told to me. But it's good, because from that point on the decision was made, well, why don't we make the pedals sound like the full amps? And a whole truckload of amps turned up at my location, which again was like the best Christmas ever.
Yes.
I was like, oh, amazing. And we started again.
Yeah.
And so I would say the V2, but the version 2 of the prototype ended up being based off the amps.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the most nerve-wracking moments, is when I think the first time you heard them.
It is such a difficult thing to not only capture the sound, because sometimes you can capture the sound of an amp, but when you plug into it, it doesn't feel the same.
No, it feels absolutely vital. I mean, the great thing from our perspective was, in the same way that, we bring a little bit of pedal expertise, the valve amp expertise, we was absolutely vital to this, because when we present you with a pedal that sounds like a pedal, but we wanted it to sound like an amp, it's that extra 5% that you just go, yeah, I see what you're saying. So listening to both you and Rabir and getting your opinions and thoughts on whether we'd hit the spot or not. Again, it's quite hard, because when you're designing these things, you want to get it right first time, and the reality is it's never going to happen.
No, never. I don't think I've ever done a design spot on first time.
These aren't for a Thorpy release. These are for Victory. And I think it made me a little bit nervous, if I'm honest, because maybe nervous is not the right term. Let's go with nervous. It's fine. Yeah. I just really, really conscious of the fact that I'm doing this and I really want it to be good. Yeah. And it really has to be true to what we're trying to achieve from the amp.
Yes.
Now, normally we would go, I want to hit that sound. And I don't necessarily have the amp there in front of me. And we'll go for it. Then we'll bring in, how does it sound compared to the amp, or how does it sound compared to this? And then we'll make adjustments. Well, with this one, it was, no, that's the end goal.
Yeah.
Every single one of these that's the end goal.
Yep.
So from the start, it was, we need to approach it differently.
And so the Sheriff pedal is the idea is that you can elicit the sound of the Victory Sheriff amp, and probably in pretty much the whole gain range when you hear one recorded.
Well, it's not as simple as I guess with the power here is the EQ. The bit that makes such a massive difference between the pedal and say the amplifier. We're almost in a position where we could go a little bit more and a little bit less, and we kind of have to bake that into this.
Yes,
it's the same with all of them in that you can't go, well, I'm only going to offer that amount of range.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have that opportunity. We had the ability to go a little bit further. So it's almost with the pedals, you can create a version of a Sheriff that you want, because it has to match to whatever amp you're using it with.
Indeed,
which is why those expanded ranges are there.
Yeah, and they're necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That hits the nail on the head. Really, is that this won't necessarily be used with another Victory product. It could be used with any sort of pedal platform or just a clean amp that may actually be providing some overdrive of its own, and then you might boost it or boost certain frequencies, some of the signal level, but not necessarily the amount of distortion.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has to have that flexibility.
Yeah, because if you've got a mid-scooped amplifier, well, how are you going to get the presence of a British gold-fronted amplifier, the Sheriff, from that? Because you're already starting from a deficit in that frequency
range.
Indeed,
yes.
So there's enough scope within the pedal to fill that gap and go past it, so you can get the character that you want from that amplifier.
Yeah, and that's the whole point. And across the whole range is that there has to be a lot more scope, if you will, than the amplifier itself.
Yes,
because you have to still enable people to elicit that sound, as you say, sometimes starting from a deficit, where there's that part of the spectrum is missing and we need to fill that. And so that you have to, make something that will do that, rather than if people were to compare that to a Sheriff amplifier side by side, they might say, well, my Sheriff middle control doesn't quite do this much as the pedal, but that's a necessity.
I mean, I guess it's a good point to raise, actually. And again, it goes with all of them, that I purposefully didn't do the work that I did through the amplifier that it was emulating.
No.
That was the side piece. And then I was running it through a clean amplifier or a different type of amplifier.
Yep.
And my goal was to try and sound like that, the Victory amplifier, but through something else.
Yep.
And all of these have had that A-B, A-B.
So, the Duchess. Now, I think this is more your little baby here, really, in terms of the circuitry. I think you probably did more.
Yeah, I think so.
I think you could nail this pretty much straight away.
It was a hard one to do as well. I guess none of it's easy, but the reason it was hard is those amps have such a nice character to them. And we were talking about with the Sheriff, like doing the A-B.
Yeah.
I think it's often harder to do the extremes. So really high gain and really low gain.
Yeah.
But then we also had use cases in our mind where we go, well, what if they're driving that amp? Just because the Duchess is a nice, clean platform doesn't mean that people aren't going to drive it. So we had to do that. Now, we had also at the same time, we had the preamp with the Class D
power amp
as well. So with the Duchess, we went against the amplifier and against that.
Yeah.
And getting the cleans was nice. But again, it was this sparkle that's quite a hard thing to capture.
Well, it is, because you're capturing really more of a. It sounds daft to say the word character, because that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
But you're not necessarily looking to capture a level of overdrive. You're looking to capture the low level harmonic content, which gives it the character.
And a bit of compression as well.
Yes.
Which, is part of why people love valve amps, and trying to literally capture it into a pedal was quite hard. But I enjoyed that one. That was a bit of a eureka moment, I think, for us, because we were like, okay. That made me smile really, really, particularly when I was like, that's great, especially running other pedals into it as well.
Well, indeed, yes. And I'll just say now, but we can perhaps talk more later, but it actually, I think, works very nicely as an overdrive pedal in its own right.
Agree.
Yeah. It made me smile because, I came along, I hadn't heard it, I plugged in, and I thought, don't think we need to do any more with this, really. It's there, sorted already. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the copper. Now again, this was one more from. I didn't need to have as much input, because I think people need to understand you built all the prototypes initially.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So these are all your babies initially. We possibly changed whether some pots were linear or log.
Yeah, that was for feel and how. Yeah. Because you want the controls to be intuitive, so you don't want it all crammed at one end.
No, that's right.
And you want a nice spread. I think with this one, it's helpful that Dan, who works for me, he is a massive Beatles fan, and also a fan of Queen. And so having those two, I'm talking massive fan, it just helped, because it felt like that sound was already baked into his head. So everything about it was just like, okay, let's roll with it, and we just went for it.
Yeah, good. And again, certain of the overdrive happens after the tone stack, so it's almost your EQ is doing something different there.
So I like that. I like the fact that the EQ affects the character of the overdrive. I think it's a great trick, because it means that you can almost get all sorts of drive sounds out of it, because it's being set up in a certain way.
Yes, you can. Yes, and very much like the Duchess, that is almost serendipitous. That not only does this have the right characteristics, but it can be used as an overdrive pedal in its own right, either to enhance a copper, or just to plug into whatever combo that you might have to do gigs with, and you want
a little bit of Brighton rock.
Yeah, you want a bit of Brighton rock.
There you go.
There you have it.
I initially was struggling with this one, because I didn't quite understand the gap that it was filling, because it has more gain than the Sheriff, or it felt that way. Slightly less gain than the Kraken, but then when you deep dive into it, I realised, okay, it's smoother, more liquid, a very guttery sound, and that's where the collaboration has been great, because I can interpret things one way looking at it, but use case is really important.
Definitely, yes.
And the education that I got with regards to this pedal was great, because it just I think it opened that up. But also you obviously had that in the back of your mind because the changes that you've made have made this, out of all of them, it wasn't my favourite, but now it is my favourite.
Oh,
so,
that's fun. Yeah.
So even though I'd worked on all of them,
yes,
the changes you've made to this one have made this my favourite out of all of them.
Yeah, and it's the thing about the clean sound on a jack is we didn't really need to emulate that part of the jack.
No, we kind of avoided it.
So because it wouldn't have been with that pedal would need to have a lot more to it. So we concentrated really on the overdrive sound, and that overdrive sound is it's not very bright. I mean, it can be depending on where you would stand in front of the speaker cabinet, but there's a liquid, there's a lead guitar sound. We tried with the EQ to offer so that you could have the no mod character. You could tighten the low end up, and if you wanted to, one criticism perhaps of the early Countess was that you had to dial the gain back a long way to get a kind of crunchy classic rock sound. So we tried to do that. We tried to, as far as we can with the scope, be able to go from that, if that's what you want, and if your amp's giving you some overdrive, to around to that fat lead sound. If
it feels very nicely spread around the dial on this one, I think. There's a lot of sounds. I think more than I was expecting. There's a lot of sounds within that pedal that are just really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So interestingly, when your first iteration of that felt very amp-like, if you know, it felt like an amplifier.
Yeah.
So then it was just a case of, as we spoke about earlier, the last 5%. It's just that little bit. It feels like an amplifier. We just got to get it to sound like that amplifier, rather than, or you know.
Well, I think this one we went around the speaker cabinets as well, because I think the character of the amp changes massively depending on what speakers. I mean, obviously, but
yes,
it was really noticeable.
Yeah, and that is, well, it's the case as with the copper, that the amplifier that you're looking, you know, the same case, the jack and the copper, the amp itself doesn't have a negative feedback loop.
Yes.
And so you, its interaction with the speaker is less controlled. So it does, that's absolutely right. You notice it more with the jack than some other amps, yeah. The bone of contention.
Bone of contention.
Yes, it was a beast to try and.
This had the most iterations, I think.
It probably did. Yeah. I think it probably had the most iterations in one day, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Because I was soldering. All right, what's that? What frequency? All right, we'll change that.
Yeah.
That day was interesting to me because.
Interesting, that's a good word, yes.
There comes a point where what we needed to stop because we were chasing our tail. You know, we were literally chasing frequencies and making a change here, change that, and we had to change that. And it became really obvious that it was almost let's roll back a little bit on the design and go again.
Yes, it did, and that was the case. I think sometimes that's exactly it. You need to go, you try to, you think, oh, we've nearly got it, so we'll just alter this, and it feels like you are getting nowhere.
So after that day, we did strip down again.
Yeah.
And we the bit that I think unlocked it to a certain point for us was on the Kraken. This is really of a weird thing, but what we did was we put white noise through the amp and then up the gain and then listen to the sweep of each one of the EQs with that white noise, and try to measure what it was doing on those specific frequencies, and on with the gain control as well. And for us, that became important to start to unlock it, because we stopped chasing our tail at that point and just went, it just needs to sound exactly like this with this white noise. And if we can achieve that, then it'll be a better iteration. I think the final version of what we did after that day, I mean, I think I've got the original. It ended up.
Here's one you prepared earlier.
We ended up with capacitors, resistor and capacitor networks, all sorts added in and pulled and soldered and resoldered, and it was good to draw a line under that and do what we did, and then you guys just revisited the last iteration and changed it up as well to meet your needs. Oh, and there's the other thing as well. Like I think we mentioned earlier that Rabir was massively invested in the Kraken sound. It's what he uses a lot, and so when he was there and he's playing a down-tuned baritone guitar through it in our place, the thing sounded totally different to how me thumbing through a normal guitar, not extended range, not at that level of volume. And it's like, I think sometimes you just need. Again, we're back to, you need to understand the use case. You need to understand who's going to use it, how they're going to use it, and for what purpose. And if you can do that, you'll nail down what you're trying to achieve. I mean, I think I'm glad that we took the time to go, right, we're failing here, let's fix it. Because we could always barrel down a road and go, it's good enough. But good enough isn't good enough. It just isn't. No. You've got to do that 5%. You've got to finish it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was almost like we were determined this was the way. This is the way. We're that close. This is the way to do it. And in fact, we just had to say, no, this isn't the way.
Not the way.
we'll go back to the fork in the road and we'll try that path and see where that leads. And that was the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Kraken, a troubled birth, but a beautiful baby afterwards.
Yes.
I have to say, it's been one of those things that I am absolutely proud of in my life.
Good.
Why? Because firstly, the difficulties we had even doing a project like this during the period that it's been growing. Everyone's been under the cosh, worldwide, and to try and to push this forward with all the difficulties that we've had it's just been pure perseverance and bloody mindedness. I think that's got us to where we are. And it's been fun as well.
Well, it's and educational. I definitely learned stuff. Because I've looked at things and I've thought I wouldn't think of doing that because I wouldn't think it would work. I wouldn't think it would work that well. I know it's going to work, but how well it's going to work.
Like I say, I'm really happy when these arrive because I just think they're solid. The design is unique, really, from a Victory perspective. I just think they look great and they feel good in the hand. But the bit I have to say, this is a little bit narcissistic on my part, is I was reading the back and it's sort of designed by Victory Amplification and Thorpy Effects, handmade in the UK by Victory Amplification. And I like that captures the collaboration.
Yes.
Because these, I said from the start, this isn't my product and it really needs to talk about or show the Victory design language because it's a Victory product. But I'm just grateful for the fact that, it's acknowledged that we've worked on these together.
Well, yes, absolutely.
And they're handmade in the UK, what you could buy, lots of pedals exist out there.
Yes.
But it's nice to support companies like Victory and obviously ourselves as well that are doing stuff of this quality in this country.
Yes, yeah, definitely.